In 2010, 12, I discovered podcasts, just started listening to them as a fan, and I just absolutely fell in love with them. I just, you know, when there's like you've probably had that sort of epiphany moment, it's like, this is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life.
I'm Robin Johnson, this is Yours for the Making, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, James Burtt, the man who actually makes this podcast.
In 2017, a mate of mine called me out, and he said, You do a lot of like this personal development. You talk about miracle morning. You talk about like, you know, the universe and manifesting. He was like, I think it's BS. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, you always talk to me about doing this podcast. But when are you going to do it? So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a month to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to call you out online and tell everyone you're just a big fat liar.
This show tells the story of the makers, the people that create things, whether it's in wood or metal, whether they're artists or musicians or chefs. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell their story.
You can't polish a turd. It doesn't matter how good the cameras are. It doesn't matter how fancy the microphones are. It doesn't matter how, you know, if you've got gold wires in the cables. If you've got a crap concept for a show that adds no value to an audience, it will not grow.
I'm Robin Johnson, this is Yours for the Making, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, James Burtt, the man who actually makes this podcast and many others. James.
It's very weird sitting in this seat. I feel very uncomfortable all of a sudden. The intimidation of the room has got to me.
You're a dab hand at this, so James, you have launched, what now, nearly 200 podcasts, successful podcasts as well.
Yeah, 189 we've launched.
As of today.
Who's counting but me? No one else, just me, because it's good for LinkedIn. Yeah, 189 podcasts and 98% of them have ended up in the iTunes charts and have had millions of downloads and all that kind of good stuff, yeah.
How did you get into it?
So I was a failed radio presenter. Like all good stories start. The hero's journey starts with someone who didn't know where they were going in life, doesn't it? And yeah, that was actually my start. So if I go right back, I was actually a cabaret singer for my sins. Have I never told you this?
No.
Okay, fine. I wish I hadn't.
On a cruise sort of cabaret?
It wasn't even that classy. So I was a cabaret singer.
Butlins.
In Iron Appa.
Oh, nice.
I was a Michael Bublé tribute in Iron Appa, so you can imagine how well that went down in most of the hotels.
No. I tell you what, you haven't told me about this, but I do know that you were on a very famous TV show, weren't you?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, again, for a very short period of time.
X Factor or Britain's Got Talent?
It was X Factor. Yeah, in 2006. Yeah, so nearly 20 years ago. Wow, I'm showing my age now. So I was a cabaret singer, and I'd met my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I was sort of gigging about, and we got to a point where I can't just be away every weekend, because that's what you do when you have that sort of lifestyle. I know you've had actual rock stars on, so they can attest to this. People are much more talented than me. But I was like, I just can't be away all the time. So I'll get a proper job. So I went to work in radio PR. I just didn't really know what radio PR was. I just got it because I was quite good at selling. But I'd always loved radio because I'd driven around, you know, for my gigging days. I'd finish a gig at 12 o'clock at night and I'd drive from, you know, as glamorous locations as like Runcorn Working Men's Club back down to Buckinghamshire where I lived with my mum and dad at the time. So I'd spend 6 hours listening to like late night love letters and all these like little niche radio stations. So I decided I wanted to go work in radio, got into radio, did sort of the PR thing and worked as a producer. I wanted to get onto the other side of the mic. So I did that for a bit, landed a job. Long story short, the ex-head of Radio 1 came into the station and sacked me because he thought I was rubbish, which he might have had a point. My favourite feature at the time was called Cheese or Breeze, where I go on to the fourth story and I'd throw 2 lumps of cheese out of a window and listeners would have to guess which one would land in the car park.
I mean, for a radio segment, that...
It's niche. It's very niche. I could see what he was saying at the time. I was most upset that he didn't think I was good enough to be on his station. But actually, retrospectively, I'm like, yeah, probably for a health and safety perspective as well. A guy just throwing cheese out of a window doesn't make a lot of sense, really. So I left radio, and then I worked in sponsorship and promotion in radio. I worked in all sorts of jobs around radio, and then in 2010, 12, I discovered podcasts, just started listening to them as a fan. And I just absolutely fell in love with them. I just, you know, when there's like you've probably had that sort of epiphany moment. It's like, this is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. I was like, that's the feeling that I had with podcasting. So that was 2012, sat on the idea for half a decade, which I really kicked myself for. And in 2017, a mate of mine called me out and he said, you do a lot of like this personal development. You talk about miracle morning. You talk about like, you know, the universe and manifesting. He's like, I think it's BS. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, you always talk to me about doing this podcast, but when are you going to do it? So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a month to do it. And if you don't do it, I'm going to call you out online and tell everyone you're just a big fat liar. And I was like, huh. And that was the catalyst to doing the first ever podcast. And I launched it. And I just used my old school PR tactics of sort of quite grandiosely talking about this new podcast launch, which had been recorded on a dining room table in southeast London. Everyone would be thinking it was like the sort of the next coming of Jesus, the way I was talking it up online. And day one it launched, and Tim Ferriss was number 1, Gary Vee was number 3, and I was number 2.
No way.
And I was like, I thought the tactic would work of how you launch a show, which is still the tactics that I use now, but it just popped. And I was like, oh my God. And then obviously this is 2017, so there weren't as many shows as there are today. But everyone's like, oh my God, how did you do it? And I didn't really know what had worked. I just knew that something had. So that was the start of the journey. And then everyone was like, oh, you're the podcast guy. I was like, yeah, I guess so. And that was it. And I was off to the races. I launched that show. Then that spawned some people getting in touch with me and saying, can you do one for like a coaching business? So I did that. And then they liked what I was doing. So like, can you come and work with us in that business? So we went off on some mad tangent for a couple of years, running a coaching business for a few years, and then came back to, I just always had this pull of like, I just want to be doing podcasting stuff. I had a property management company. I had this coaching company. We had a media company. I was like, the thing I just want to do is make podcasts. I was like, why do I keep fighting it? And then I was fighting it because I had golden handcuffs, because I started making really good money for the first time in business. I've dabbled in loads of different bits and pieces, mainly unsuccessfully. And then this thing had sort of worked really well. I was like, oh, that's cool. But it just weirdly pulled me further away from what I really wanted to be doing, which was the podcast stuff. So then, you know, COVID rolls round, and I'd had people who asked me all the time, can you launch my podcast? Can you help me with my podcast? I haven't got time.
Suddenly you have.
Suddenly I had nothing but time, literally nothing but time. So that's how I started the agency. And here we are today.
And you work with clients kind of from all walks of life, all backgrounds. You know, I know you're doing this show with Jermaine Genius, and you've done one with Derek Chisora, you're doing an Ibiza one at the moment. But then at the same time, you've launched podcasts for accountants, bookkeepers. You know, you talk about...
Sound a bit more enthusiastic, please.
Sorry, accountants, bookkeepers. You know, but it's everything. And actually, the reason I launched this podcast was because I was on your mate Jimbo, yours and Jimbo's podcast.
Yeah,
and I was just a phone-in guest on there, and both of you like, why aren't you leveraging your personal brand? It's something I didn't really feel like, you know, why would anyone want to have anything to do with that? And the more I thought about it, I think I sat on it for maybe 3 or 4 months thinking, should I do that? Is that the right thing? And then we got on a call, it kind of outlined what it could do and how it was going to work. And for me, it was just, you know, take a punt on it. And I saw results probably within the first, I mean, I know you've used it as an example, but one of my early guests came in, saw what we were doing, said, "Oh, great, done some more work," and started giving us work.
Yeah,
based on just coming in. So, and we were having this discussion over lunch earlier about kind of how do you monetize a podcast? It's not just how many views you get on YouTube, monetize that and sell adverts. It's not, you know, me saying, "Oh, buy this tool," and
could be that as well.
Could be that, yeah.
Will be coming in 2026.
Yeah. But then, you know, but it isn't. That's just not. That's kind of the blinkered view of how to monetize podcasts or what you're doing. From a broader perspective, you know, if you've got a podcast, you can be attracting potential clients on as guests to showcase what you're doing in your environment, have a good conversation, build that rapport without any kind of pressure or money changing hands or anything like that. And then you've already got that rapport with someone who you might want as a client. And then you're almost positioned on that platform. You know, you're up on a pedestal because you're the host.
Yeah.
So the power plays there, you know, you already kind of positioned yourself as someone that they want to work with because they're here as a guest. So there's many ways that it can be kind of monetized without even monetizing it from a traditional view as in kind of pay-per-view, pay-per-click or advertising a product.
I thought the sort of the standard monetization model was when I first got into it. I was like, that's how I'm going to make money from it. I would do, when I first did 2017, as I said, I was on my dining room table in Southeast London. I didn't have any intention of monetizing it. I didn't need to do it for that. It was just something in me that was like, well, it's basically trying to pay back the people that sacked me off the radio. It was like, I'll show you, I'll become the UK's best podcaster, which I was for about 5 minutes till Bartlett came along. But that traditional media model is exactly right. Effectively, if you don't pay for something, if you don't pay for a product or service, you are the product or service. So the audience who listens to this for free, they potentially are the service that an advertiser would want, because the more numbers you get, the more you can charge for. And that was the sort of the world that I understood it to be. But very quickly, again, because of my PR background, I was like, actually, these podcasts are doing more than just getting an audience. They're building expert authority. You're becoming a voice in your sector, in your space. And as you mentioned, we do stuff for accountants. We do recruitment. We've done the most niche one ever to show you how powerful podcasts can be in an uber niche. We had a guy approached me and he said, I've heard you on LinkedIn saying that, you know, most niches would work for a podcast. I'm not sure that mine will. I was like, well, I'm yet to see one that doesn't work. Tell me. And he said, I do short-term, I'm a recruiting agency, effectively. We do short-term contracts. I was like, well, that would work. He said, yeah, but we only do it for geological sector. I was like, okay, it's a bit more niche. He said, and we're only doing it for a segment called deep piling. So this guy's now a recruiter in deep piling for short-term contracts and only going after geology clients. And he turned around and he said to me, should I do a podcast? I went, in all honesty, mate, I actually don't know. I like a niche, but that's a niche of a niche of a niche. And this was the real light bulb moment for me, because this must have been 4 years ago. He was one of our really early clients. And I said, well, what does podcast success look like for you? And he said, well, look, really, there's only 25 companies in the entire country that I could ever work with. I just want a way to be different from everybody else, because as a recruitment firm, you basically phone up, you go in there cap in hand, to your point, you change the power dynamic when you're a host of a podcast. But ordinarily, a recruiter's phoning up going, do you need any staff at the moment? It's a closed question anyway. Yes, we do. No, we don't. If no, great, I'm going to call you back in 6 months. If they do need staff, great, can we pitch for that work? But if you're doing that, you're not really building up brand, you're not building up authority, you're not building up a relationship, like you mentioned a minute ago. You're not building up know, like, and trust, which takes time to develop. You're just making a sales call. Whereas if you're making that same phone call saying, hey, I've got a podcast about geological deep piling, love to have you on the podcast, then you're going to spend, we've had conversations in this room that have gone on for, an hour and a half, 2 hours nearly, some of them. You're building know, like, and trust that whole time. And the person who you're talking to doesn't even realize that you're building rapport, you're building a relationship in essence. And what we found for a lot of our clients, they use podcasts instead of doing sort of sales discovery calls, because it does take the place of that. And the power dynamic you mentioned before, instead of me coming to you cap in hand now going, hey, can I sell you something? Now all of a sudden I'm going, would you like something from me? The law of reciprocity kicks in. So you want to give me something back because I've given something to you first. But also the power dynamic, now we're not on a sales environment. We're on an environment where you're in my house and I'm going to make you look great. And I'm going to make you look and feel like a rock star. And then all of a sudden you're going to, even unconsciously, you're going to want to do business with me. It works super well.
I certainly can attest to that, because, like I said, we've had numerous conversations where either I've got a guest on, or maybe a friend of a guest that's been on has gone, oh, I didn't know like what you do. Some people I know have watched this podcast, but have never seen any of the shows that I've done, and don't know the business that I run. And have said to, a mutual friend, oh, I've watched that podcast with that guy, Robin. Oh, yeah, what does he do? Oh, he's got it's filmed in his joinery.
Yeah.
And he's on the BBC. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's kind of opening doors for me in that respect, where I'm potentially being put in front of people that would never have seen me otherwise. And for me, it's like, maybe 1 in 100 of them might be a potential client, maybe one day. So it's kind of opening those doors as well. But you just don't know, do you? When kind of for my business anyway, you don't know who's going to come to you and ask for your services. But I guess that could be the same across any field. I often have this conversation with people who are makers who are sat here who are saying, oh, I charge quite a lot. I don't know who I'm going to sell to. I certainly wouldn't spend X amount on the thing that I'm making, but but you don't know who you're going to be selling to. So if you can get yourself in front of 1,000 people, maybe one of them might be a future client. So for me, the podcast is giving me a platform to potentially access people that I wouldn't normally have access to, but also because I've got guests on, I'm widening my network almost exponentially because I've got a garden designer on. He shares the garden, the interview like we did before. He'll share it on his LinkedIn, his socials. All of a sudden, his network are now aware of the podcast.
Absolutely.
Or me, or might be a bit more interested. And it might be that one of those little connections, there's a little spark, like a little thought in a brain that goes, it's him. Oh, he can do that. Oh, maybe he's the guy for the job.
The makers analogy is really interesting because you wouldn't go to, like a joinery firm like you, or we've had, Gilded Mirrors, and we've talked about pizza or bespoke brewing or kombucha that's been brewed as we speak around the corner. None of those trades go to work on a Monday morning and don't really know what they're going to work with. Unless, I guess, you're a sculptor. There's no one in your business, for example, that's going to here's a lump of wood, make something interesting from that lump of wood. But when it comes to content, that's what people do. They're very, why are you doing a podcast? If I get on a sales call, sales per se, it's almost, by the time they get to me, because of personal brand, which has been elevated from podcasts, they're kind of half sold already. So I very rarely do like a cold call because they already know, not like they know who I am, like I'm a big deal, but they know that I know my stuff.
They will now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. But in that instance there, if somebody ever says to me on a discovery call, why are you making a podcast? Oh, because everyone else has got one. That for me is the end of the conversation. Yeah. Or why do you want to make a podcast? Oh, because I want to sell adverts. Like, again, the end of the conversation for, that can be it if you've got a big audience already, but it takes time to build up to that. But with regards to, we've talked about certain guests that you've had on, the way that people who are making podcasts can make it even more valuable is being tactical with getting those right guests on. So just to make sure that people at home have understood what we're saying here, yes, there's the 1,000 people who are potentially listening to this podcast, but you can actually curate spending time with the exact right person based on who is your, in LinkedIn land, they call it an ICP, your ideal client profile. So who are those companies that you want to target? Who are your dream clients? If I could give you 10 of these dream clients, what would they be? And then go out and get them and bring them in as guests and be very, very tactical with it and almost like sell the concept of the podcast. I've seen it work so many times. We had a marketing agency that we used to work for. And I just said to her off the cuff, I said, what do you think, the podcast has brought you in? I know you can't track it all the time. She went, no, we do track it. It's £638,000 last year. And that was £1 million agency. So, over half of their money had been directly attributed because of the podcast, which I found staggering. But it was really, really interesting that that's where they'd got the leads from, because again, in a world where they're doing B2B marketing and everyone else is going, hello, we're a B2B agency, can we do your B2B marketing because we're a B2B agency? She's gone in reverse engineered and gone, hey, can you come onto my podcast, and shifted the power dynamic.
That's really interesting, actually. And now a lot of the comments that I get from people watch this go, wow, this is so polished. And even comments on YouTube, they're like, wow, this is so polished, such a high level of production. How come you've only got 200 followers or 300 views on the videos? Which I get, but it's quite niche. But actually, to start and launch a podcast, you don't need, we're surrounded by cameras here. You've got your production mixing set up over there. It's going to
I don't know what that does, by the way. It's all just for decoration, just because I think it looks fancy.
So you can justify your day rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you
bring this stuff out.
Quick, empty that bag over there. But you don't need it, do you?
No.
Really, you don't even need a podcast to be video format. You could do it for audio. I mean, I think there's benefits to it for 100%. Sure. But a lot of people listen to this podcast rather than watch it. And you could just be sat in a bedroom with a microphone recording it, right?
Absolutely.
The fundamental things are, for me, what I consider is if you were going to start a podcast, you just need to be able to clearly get your point across, not necessarily ramble and rabbit, although I can be very guilty of that often. And you just got to have a purpose to what you're doing. The actual launching of the podcast and the back end of the podcast and stuff, you've actually created a course in that people can, pay a very reduced amount of money to do the course and then learn how to do it all themselves.
Yeah, I started that because during lockdown, so prior to lockdown, I did consultancies to help people launch their podcast, but I wouldn't really do the ongoing production. And it was really simple maths. At the time, I used to charge, I think it was like 1,500 quid to launch a podcast. This is like 7 years ago when I was first getting started. 1,500 quid to launch a podcast. Then lockdown happened and I was like, oh no one's going to pay me 1,500 quid a day anymore. What could I do? I was like, well, instead of charging 1,500 quid for a day, why don't I do it online? Because Zoom was first sort of popping off. And I was like, well, if I've got 10 people to pay me 150 quid, they can have a 90% discount off the price and I can still make the same day rate. So I was like, I'll just do that. So that's why I launched the training in person, online training model to start with, and then subsequently launched the course off the back of it, because not everyone's got a budget to do it. And not everyone has the requirement. You know, to your example, you've landed a piece of work through this podcast, which will pay for the cost of this podcast for 5 years. You know, I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but he's makes lovely woodwork stuff, guys. But not everybody's in that position. So the main thing is, you know, yeah, you can learn to launch podcasts for free. Like you can. The main thing to be aware of before you ever even press record on a microphone, is what form of education, information or entertainment are you going to give? What are you uniquely qualified to communicate to? And effectively, and I said this a minute ago, like, why are you actually doing it? What is the purpose of doing this podcast? Because if it is just for fame, or if it is just for download numbers, or if it is just for vanity, or if it is just for adverts, I've never really seen that work out very well for people. So again, get really clear on what form of education, information or entertainment are you going to give people. Consistency is really key. Really, really key. So one of the biggest predicators on success or failure of a podcast will be, are you going to stick at it? I think 80% of podcasts still never get beyond episode 7, which is mad to me in this day and age.
Really?
But yeah. It's still true. Because the thing is, everyone's like, well, everyone's got a podcast these days, but they don't. You know, last month, for example, I'm a bit of a data geek with all this stuff. There was 380,000 active podcasts last month. 380,000, that was it. And they might listen to that and go, wow, that's a lot of podcasts. But there's 1 billion YouTube channels. There's 2 billion people using Facebook. There's 800 million people using LinkedIn every day.
There's 1 billion YouTube channels.
There's 1 billion YouTube channels, yeah. But that's because for a Google account, by default, you get a YouTube account with it. So they might not all be active.
It's like an eighth of the world's population.
An eighth of the world, yeah, just sitting there, just selfie videoing themselves. That's a sad world, isn't it? But there's so much less competition in the podcasting space. But you've got to be consistent to it. But you could start a podcast for zero budget. There's a platform which is now called Spotify for Creators. It used to be Anchor, but it's now Spotify for Creators. You could record on your mobile phone using your iPhone headphones, which would give you good enough quality. You could run it into Spotify for Creators, and that would give you a good enough quality to get started. But as long as you know what you're doing it for, who you're doing it for, and why you're doing it, then you could get cracking. And as long as you're going to stick and be consistent with it.
I mean, you mentioned Stephen Bartlett. He is like well, there's two, isn't there? There's loads actually, but if you think of success in the podcast space purely based on the podcast, look at Stephen Bartlett. He's absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
And I saw a post he put up a couple of days ago, you know, the picture of him in his little hat in 2017 in his bedroom.
Yeah.
Just like trying it.
I remember listening to those shows.
Really?
I listened to episode 1 and I was like, who even is this guy? Because I knew of Social Chain.
Yeah.
I'd seen this random geezer with a pork pie hat and I was like, what's that all about? But yeah, he used to record it under a blanket underneath his staircase in his little apartment in Manchester after he'd sold his first company.
And now look where he is. Joe Rogan, you know, I guess he's not the original podcaster, but he's probably one of the most well-known ones.
Yeah.
He's just doing it because he's getting high with his mates just for a laugh and recording it. And now look where he is, you know, the number one show in the entire world, not just podcast, but show.
And this goes back to, yeah, exactly that. And that's a really good point. We'll touch on that in a second. It's a show, not just a podcast now. But they, without getting too woo-woo about it, I think both of those people did that with pure intent. Joe Rogan, maybe Stevens was a bit more, because he's a marketeer at heart, so he probably had a marketing angle for it from the get-go. You know, was he really underneath the blanket under the stairs, or is that just a good origin story? I generally think he was, because you could hear the audio quality back in the day was terrible. But Joe Rogan just did it because he wanted to have amazing conversations with people. And sometimes the joy of doing the thing, you should get the joy from doing it regardless of the outcome. Now, of course, it's a marketing effort for most businesses. You know, it's a marketing effort. You've been traveling around the UK for the last month non-stop filming TV shows, and you've got massive projects, and you've got a team of your lads, and they're having to work overtime to finish projects and all that stuff. The last thing that someone as busy as you needs is to sit on a Friday afternoon and do 8 hours of recordings. But you have got a genuine desire to learn from the people that you have on, and that comes across. And in terms of the point where we didn't sort of touch on that you mentioned earlier, where people go, oh, it's so polished, it's so professional, how come you've only got 200 subscribers? Because it takes time.
Yeah.
Again, back to the Bartlett example, he showed that from 2017, he's got a really famous graphic that he puts up about once a year. And I love showing people this. Nobody cared for 3 years. Nobody cared from 2017 to, no, it was 5 years, 2017 to 2022. Nobody cared, flatline. Didn't really get more than 1,000 downloads. And then something happened and it just went ding, 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 and now it's gone off like a rocket. But in how many situations are you mining for diamonds and you stop just as you're about to break through the wall and find the jewels on the other side? So that's why you've got to do it on a subject that you're an expert in, that you can find other intrinsic value. So I used to do a podcast called Building the Brand. I didn't need to have lots of listeners to run adverts because I was very tactical with the content. I would talk about branding and brand consultancy, and people would message me and go, oh, you do brand consultancy? I heard about it on your podcast. Can I book you in? But I'll also talk about how much I charge. So again, I'm already telling them what I do, how I do it, and how much it costs. So when they get on the call with me, they're pretty much, unless I really fluff a sales call, they're good to go in terms of, getting across the line. So, but I would never have made, £1,500 in a day's worth of advertising money off that podcast because it never really did more than, 10,000 downloads. And, a mutual person that we both know, Jimbo, who I do the business broadcast, which is where you and I first met. Some of the most intangible benefits of podcasting are crazy. Like, for example, he gets people who genuinely, every single day now, people reach out and try to sell him their business because of the relationship he's built one way with them, because they're never cold when they come to him, because obviously he's a warm audience to him, but he doesn't know them. They know him, or they feel that they know him. And they know in advance as well how he buys businesses and what he wants to buy. So Jimbo will often talk. He always wants the best price he can get. He always wants an element of vendor financing. He never wants to have to use his own money. He wants to use the capital so he can invest it into the business, not to the buying of the business. He'll probably have 10 inquiries this week that I've listened to his podcast and know and still want him to buy their business, which is an intangible benefit. And again, if you look at the numbers that podcast gets, which is accumulated over a bunch of time, but the value of that is so much more than what he could possibly get from adverts. And same for me, I get loads of leads now from doing that podcast, because you're talking about the expert thing that you are known for, and that builds up value with the audience ultimately.
It's quite an interesting thing when you think about growth and stuff. I mean, the Bartlett graph is mad because he's just passed 13 million subscribers or whatever it is.
Yeah, a billion views I think he done last week. Yeah,
good for him.
Yeah.
But it is flat like that. But there's another. I was talking to a good friend of mine about this the other day. We were talking about the podcast, and I was trying to get him to come on as a guest and everything else. And he was saying about that. I can't remember the name of it. You'll know it. It's a little record shop where people, like artists, come in and they'll like record a session in this little record shop in the States somewhere. And I can't remember the name of it. It's
Rough Trade's a famous one here, isn't it?
It's not Rough Trade. It's in the States and it's an independent one, but they'd have people in, right? And they had loads of guests in, but it was just like flat. And then T-Pain came and did a session in there, blew it away. Absolutely killed it. And their chart had been like that. Yeah. And then T-Pain just rocketed, and then the next guest up from that, and up from that, and up from that. Everyone's on there now. Yeah. And then T-Pain came back and did another one, and it was like, all these people have done this show, but it was him that was a catalyst for it jumping up. And I think it's really interesting because, possibly he's not the biggest name out there, but it's maybe he shared it well on his network, who then shared it and shared it and shared it. And that's the other thing that I find, as someone that relies on, other than this cost, we do not advertise. I don't spend any money on advertising because really we've probably got more work than we want, which is a really nice position to be in, unless, really up against it. But we don't really spend any money on advertising because, for us, our client base is a bit different. I know you've got a lot of clients at the same, it's very niche. And unless you're advertising directly to that niche, and you're wasting money, right? What I viewed this as was, it's a good way to spend a marketing budget, but it's a great way to meet people, to have guests on, to help kind of people be inspired by it. I'm not doing this podcast because I want to sell everyone joinery and furniture. It'd be wrong of me to say I'm doing this because I want to sell more joinery, because I want to sell more joinery, but this isn't the reason. I talk about apprenticeships quite a lot, and I talk about the skills being lost. It's something I feel passionately about. And if by doing this podcast I can raise the awareness, or maybe bring more people into the trade, although to be fair, a lot of the time me and the guests are saying, it's really hard, and you've got to work really hard and you make money. So I'm probably not the best advertisement for it, but I kind of, there's a bit of raising awareness of the fact that, heritage and traditional skills are being lost across all trades, not just joinery and furniture making, but across everything. And then highlighting other issues that, I feel strongly about, or I know people that feel strongly about, and that are of an interest to me. So for me, it's a nice thing to do. And also, being a presenter on the BBC, I have to follow I don't follow a script. It's not scripted, my stuff. But it might be a script, but I've got to say certain things in a certain way.
You're on railroads, aren't you?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
We follow the format, and that's that. And you've got to be you, but 20% more, and all of this sort of stuff. Whereas
I'd love to see you doing that.
Oh, you can tune in if you want. BBC One, BBC One 7:30 on a Friday. But the difference is, when I sit down and do this podcast, I can be unapologetically myself. Yeah. I can swear as much as I want. Yeah. I can say what I want to who I want to talk to. Yeah. And that's a rare thing in my life, in my line of work. It's a rare thing, because I'm either in front of a client sort of saying, yes, 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 or I'm on the phone to my bank saying no, no, no.
Or in front of the camera going, yes, yes,
or in
yes.
front of the camera saying, yes, yes. Like Jimbo, essentially he was a clown before he started his business.
Some days he still is.
But he leans into it.
Yeah.
But this gives me a platform to be who I want to be, and talk to who I want to talk to about things that I want to talk about.
It's also building your personal brand. And you mentioned there, because I remember on one of the first phone calls we said, because the origin story of it was you came onto this other podcast where we basically give coaching advice to businesses. Yeah. And you came on, it just sort of came up in conversation. Like, you come across great, and you're running a great business. Then you slipped into the conversation. Well, I do a bit of presenting on BBC. I'm like, sorry, come again, what? But then when I had that conversation with you initially, I remember you saying it was the heritage skills, that was the key thing that you wanted to get across. And that builds personal brand. So whilst you are not directly selling joinery services, whilst there isn't an advert from, this podcast is sponsored by Johnson Bespoke. Maybe we should do that, test it out, it'd be nice. But anyone who's watching it, who builds up know, like, and trust, who builds authority with you vicariously through watching your content, and knows how important you think that heritage is, and has watched the episode with you and Rich, and they know that your foreman's been here with you, through thick and thin from the get-go, and he's 65 and he's still, or 67, still doesn't want to retire, and he's still the first one through the door, and he's so passionate to show other people because he was the fastest person to put a box sash window together when he was a kid. All that stuff builds up intrinsic brand value, so that if I've got a bunch of money for a high-end project, there's only one place. If I've seen this content, there's only one firm that I'm going to use to spend my money with because of the brand value that's been built up. And you also made a really good point, because we were talking about the T-Pain situation. You just never know which episode is going to pop. You never know which episode is going to pop. So this podcast I used to do, Building the Brand, I interviewed Grant Cardone, the guy who invented the trunky suitcase, Joseph Valente, won The Apprentice, Richard, first ever Britain's Got Talent winner, I can't remember what his surname was. I interviewed him. All these people about how they built these brands. Some massive marketeers, some John Lee Dumas, who's got a massive audience over in America. Do you know the episode that was most popular? It was me and my wife. Talk about what it's like to live in a 2-entrepreneur household when you're raising small kids. And I have never had feedback like it apart from that episode. It was mad. So you just never know the ones that are going to pop.
What was she wearing?
She was, this is audio only. It was audio only. She had a bag over her head. So she always walks around the house. But that episode showed me that actually the audience that or the big time guest is not necessarily the thing that's going to give you the result that you potentially wanted. And also, to your point about the sort of the shareability of it, the great thing with podcasting is not only do you, especially if you're B2B and you're doing stuff that works well for LinkedIn, which is why we do LinkedIn sort of length content within the clips that we make, is because then vicariously you automatically get the network effect of that guest.
Yeah.
So on other social media platforms, by definition, squash the reach. Instagram will show any post you do, that will show it to 3% of your audience. It depends on how they act within the first 10 minutes or the first few minutes of it. Depends if they'll show it to the next bunch of people. So I'm sure it's like 3%, then 9%, and then it goes wider. That's how it works. Yeah. So let's see if people go, I've not seen your content for ages. It's because they haven't engaged with it. So Instagram's not showing it to them. So that's what you get in most social media platforms. Facebook's the same. TikTok's a little bit different because that's why it's so popular as a discovery tool. But LinkedIn, for example, if I put a post out, when this goes out, I'll put a post out and I'll tag you into that post. Now, everyone who knows me will potentially see that post if they happen to be on the timeline that day. But also, what will then happen is that you'll be linked to it. And then what will most likely happen within the next couple of days, you'll put a post out and someone who follows me but doesn't follow you will see your content as a second connection. So you get this network effect of other content. So again, for you got to be very mindful when you're picking guests that you don't need, who's a big person in your space, like the guy who does all of the grand designs. He would probably, or Phil and Kirsty or whatever, in the sort of the home lifestyle luxury sort of space. They would probably be big names who've got a big audience. But actually, I bet having them in your podcast would not move the needle 10% as much as, when you had RX Designs on, for example, because the right sorts of people are watching your content. And also for people who've got smaller audiences, so guests that you bring on that have got smaller audiences, they're much more likely to actually share the content out. They're actually more likely for all the assets that you create and all that kind of stuff. They're more likely to show a level of gratitude for being featured on the show. That means that they'll actually push it further for you. We did I won't say the brand and I won't say the person, but a very high-end fashion brand we did a podcast launch for, and we brought in some paid for guests, which is the only time I've ever done it, but it was because we were doing it on we had the sort of a whole narrative around it. So we had a guest and the host and stuff. We paid for their time. They got a lovely outfit and blah, 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 and all this stuff. The person who had the biggest audience, oh no, he didn't actually have the biggest audience. He had the smallest audience of the paid for people. The guy was an absolute arse. Wouldn't share it out. Wanted to be paid extra to share it out. The knew he was coming on because of his reach, if that makes sense. I wanted to get paid for it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But other people who've been on the podcast would share it out. We heard a small audience, but were super grateful for it. Shared it out 2 or 3 times. Oh, can I make additional content? Have you got any more of those clips? Can I have the raw footage so I can make my own content? I've got a video guy. Can I bring him to do behind the scenes content? So I guess the lesson in essence there, sort of summarising this little segment, is you just never know which episode's going to pop. And you also never know which is going to find your truest, most valuable audience. Today, for example, we batch record these podcasts. We've had an unbelievable conversation about forestry and trees. Now, that guy's probably not got the biggest audience in the world. In fact, I know he hasn't got the biggest audience in the world. But for people who like his stuff, so knowledgeable. He's talking about like the forest floor and the danger of having over exposed deer populations and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, this is fascinating. So I might now vicariously through if he shares that content out, people who know, like, and trust him and know how much of an expert that he is, now they come and find your content. And again, it's a bit, feels a bit contrived, but there's a reason for doing it. When I'm getting guests on, I'm very, very tactical. I call it kidnapping audiences, which sounds well sinister, but I'm very mindful of who can I get on where I can, like 10% of their audience that they bring over, I can hold on to. And be very intentional with that, because then also that's how you organically start to build out your show. And also on the final point, and you don't have it with your show because of the sorts of guests that you have on, but if you're trying to grow a show, you be very mindful of guests that you don't think would be a good fit, but you would potentially do it for the audience size. Don't do that. Never do that. Like, I had a big influencer from America who I thought was a hot air talker, basically. They put themselves out as this branding business expert. I don't actually know how they make money. When I used to building the brand, it was tactical, practical advice for people who've actually built exciting brands and businesses. That was the remit. That's the people I was going to have on. And this guy got into his team got in touch. He had like a couple of million followers. Oh, such and such. And he said his name then, or her name, they, them. His team reached out and said, oh, he'd love to come on to do your show. Yeah, not one for me at the moment, not accepting guests. Oh, but this would be a perfect fit. We're doing some events in the UK, and you've been flagged as one of the shows that we should definitely come and do. He'll share it out. He'll do a post, he'll do a collaborative post. But in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I don't believe what this guy says. I think he's talking bollocks. So I shouldn't do it. And there was a moment where I was like, would I like to have 3 or 4 million people know about this content? Would that be of benefit? And I was like, yeah, but I've sold my soul because I know I just don't believe what this person has to say. So in the end, I just said no. And I would, rather have the right kind of audience than a massive audience of the wrong kind of eyeballs and earbuds, effectively.
Because that's important, isn't it? That's another thing that I feel quite strongly about, is being my authentic self. Like I said about, I can be myself, but it is about being my authentic self. So although I've had a couple of guests that I didn't really know beforehand, you put me in touch with Matthew from Farrago. Great guy, doing a really, really cool thing. But you said, oh yeah, he'd be really good. Here he is, have a look at him. I thought, yeah, actually, there's a lot we have in common that we can talk about, a lot of common ground. It's worked really well. What I was talking about with kind of a few of the other guys at work, I was thinking, well, who can we have on as guests? And they're saying, oh, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? And they're all big name people. I think, what would I have to speak to them about? What's my common ground? Because this podcast is like a relaxed, informal chat. It almost sounds like often between two mates.
Yeah.
We'll sit here, and quite often it is, they're my mates sat there, so it's quite easy.
Yeah. But
to try and then keep that going with people that I don't know, if we've got common ground, it's very easy. But if if you said to me, oh, I know so-and-so, I know, like you said, the Grand Designs guy, McLeod, is it? Kevin McLeod?
Kevin McLeod.
Oh, yeah, I know Kevin. I'll get him in. We'll have a chat. Yeah, great. I can be an absolute fanboy for Grand Designs and everything else. But then, apart from asking all the questions under the earth about Grand Designs, what do I have as common ground with him?
Yeah.
I know he comes from a silversmithing background. Maybe I can ask about that. But am I just having him on because I really like Grand Designs? Like you said, he's not going to share it, is he? He's on bloody Grand Designs. Where's he going to go from there? And actually, I've had a few people that have asked me directly, oh, I'll come on your podcast if you want. If you do this for me, give us a discount on the work, and I'll come on your podcast. I'm like, surely it's the other way.
The other way around, yeah.
But like one of them in particular, household name. And I just kind of was like, I don't really need it.
Yeah.
Not from I don't need the, that actually sounded really big-headed.
It did. Wow, the ego, the true you has really come out in this episode.
My authentic self.
This is him, laid bare, everybody. No, but I get your point.
I didn't. I thought, but I'm not trying to just have
famous people on.
Yeah, or just grow it. Like Tim was saying, Tim Craig, when he came on and was talking about, the Netflix films, he said, ultimately, it's eyes in front of screens. When eyeballs on screens, that's what it's all about. He does that in the most beautiful way and really creates the environment. If you ever watched any of the things that he's ever done, it's him doing it because you feel like you're fucking there. But
it's number one on Netflix today, isn't that?
Yeah,
the UK and the US.
Because it looks incredible.
Yeah, it does.
And he always works with a good team, the best producers, everything, But this friend of mine was like, oh yeah, if you, I'll come and do your podcast as a favour if you look after me on this price. And I was thinking, he's really well known. I like the guy, but like, I'm not going to just sit there and interview him to give him so he gets the discount, which was kind of a bit weird.
Sense. Yeah.
But what am I going to get out of it? I'm not going to get people that really care about the conversations I'm having because I've just I feel like I've almost just brought him in.
Yeah, I get it with because I do some like celebrity podcast. People are always saying, "Oh my god, I can't believe he follows you on Instagram." Like, who cares? I don't know them. They're not my friends. I might have met them and done a podcast with them, if that makes sense. They're not my pals. Like, literally, who cares? Does it add any value to to your life. I'm not sure, maybe from a credibility standpoint it does, but I've had people look me up because there's an ongoing joke of the podcast I do with Jimbo. So my handle on Instagram is James Burtt Official because I couldn't get James Burtt, so I just put official. I don't know, I just put it. Jimbo thinks it's the funniest thing ever. He's like, who does he think he is? Blah, blah, blah. And people have been going, oh, no, I can see why he's got official because he's got all these like celebrity friends. I'm like, but it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't do anything. And to the point of like podcasting, just be careful of the metrics that you're chasing. Because again, if for example, let's say, when you came to me and had the conversation, you wanted to inspire the next generation of makers. You wanted to shine a light on people. We've had bladesmiths. Who knew you could make a blade from a meteorite? Who knew that so much goes into Joe's gardens that he's thinking about the smell of a garden, or who knows who goes into the beautiful Booyah kombucha and stuff. But if, for example, I could say, instead of like shining a light like you'd intended to do originally, instead of shining a light on those amazing trades and talk about beautiful heritage skills that are being lost, if instead I could go, oh, here's a massive audience, but they don't really care about the thing that you do, I don't think you'd make that trade. I mean, maybe I might be wrong, but honestly, I don't think you'd make that trade because it's not about just the number of people who are listening. It's about the quality of the person who's listening. I don't mean about, like the value of them as a person based on advertisers. I'm talking about the audience you actually want to talk to, the audience you actually want to communicate with. Because I think that's really important to bear that in mind. Like, who are you actually doing this for?
Well, I always think, I listen to the podcast on the day it comes out every day. I listen to it on the drive in, I listen to it on the drive home. And I think if I ever get a guest on, where I don't even want to listen to that, or I can't listen to the episode, or I don't want to listen to the episode, that's the end of it for me.
Is this you telling me that this one's not going out? Feels like it. It must feel like that.
No,
yeah, I do.
No, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd never consider getting a guest on that I wouldn't want to listen to.
No, I get it.
Talk for an hour because my role as a host is to facilitate, and normally, intentionally so. I will talk for the least amount on that episode. Don't get me wrong, there's been one or two where I've talked probably too much. Depends if I've had a coffee just before or not. But if I think that I've got someone on that I'm not going to want to listen to them talk for an hour, it's going to be a hard podcast to film, but it's going to be a bloody hard sell to listen to as well. And I think I'm probably making this podcast for people who are kind of like me a little bit. I mean,
I think everyone does to an extent. I think you don't, it's the same with like your brand. Your brand probably appeals to people who are like you. You don't want to make, you could probably, a manufacturer of cheap tables could come in and go, can you smash out 50 of these a day and we'll pay you 5 times the money? You wouldn't want to do that because you get absolutely no joy out of it. You want to appeal to people who are like you, who see the craftsmanship in what's been built, who look at what you showed me earlier, veneer. I don't know, I can't even explain, but like the craftsmanship, like how angry you are that you've got to veneer a drawer because then you've got the thingy bobby, you lose the dovetail. I don't even know what that means. But all that like work, that's the stuff you want to make. That's the audience you want to appeal to. It's the same with your content. It makes sense that you make it for people who are like you, who have got the same sort of values or take value in the same stuff that you think is of importance. I think that just makes complete sense, really.
Well, that's who's listening, hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
James, if someone wanted to do their own podcast, what advice would you give them and where do you start? And if someone wanted you to do their podcast for them, how can they get in touch?
So if you're going to do a podcast, and this is the first question I always ask clients before I ever start working with them, and I think it's a really valuable question. What does podcast success look like for you? And actually put pen to paper. I know that we live in a digital age, and I know you might want to type it down in Google Docs, you can share it with your team and blah, blah, but actually put pen to paper. There's something intrinsically about, when you make things manifest, when you actually craft it from your mind and put it down, there's something tangible about that connection. So write down, what does podcast success look like to you? Next, think about, and we talked about it earlier, what form of information, education or entertainment do you want to give people? Effectively, who is this podcast for and why are you wanting to do it? And what are they going to get from doing it? And then I would look at, for me personally, and this is not about duplicating or copying anybody, but I always like to look at, who are the best players in the marketplace and look at what are the good bits that you would want to embody and what are the bits you don't like and you wouldn't want to embody. And just look at what's out there. And again, it's not about being competitive, because weirdly, it's one of those sectors. Just because I listen to this podcast doesn't mean I won't listen to another podcast about craftsmanship, because it's not like that. It's not a finite game. You can win and these other podcasts can win as well. So look at your category or your subcategory and have a look at what best practice looks like. So, for example, there's 20 top line categories in the podcasting world, from business to finance to health and fitness and, money, charity, all kinds of, there's a sub niche for everything. Look in those categories and see what works best and work out what you want to do and why. And then I like the idea of, if you're going to do an interview podcast, which it doesn't have to be an interview, but if you are, I like to write down like 50 names of my dream guest, which again just reaffirms like, what am I trying to create? It might sound a bit woo-woo. I'm trying to like manifest like, what does the ideal scenario sort of look like? And then I'll put that stuff down. And then do you know what? It's about, for me personally, yes, you've got to do artwork, you've got to set up an RSS feed, you've got to do all the branding and blah, blah, blah. But before you do any of that stuff, I think it's a case of just have a go. Start now, get perfect later. You might find, and I've had this with people, they don't actually like doing a podcast. They think they want to do a podcast. I think they're, especially when we're doing corporate B2B podcasts, you might get the marketing director or the CEO or the finance officer, or whoever gets drafted in to be the host of this thing. They've got no inclination to do it. They've got no desire to do it. They've got no want to do it. So just see if you like doing it. You wanted to have long form conversations that you never had before, because you talk normally down the barrel of a camera, or you talk to someone about something in an auction, you talk to them for 2 or 3 minutes, it gets cut up by the camera people. You might have sat down and had hour and a half conversations about, pizzas and gone, I don't actually really like this. Brewing brothers, what can I learn from these guys? But it just so happens you've got amazing people you can always learn a lesson from, and you really like doing it. So have a go and see if you actually like doing it. And then I would say, from that first recording, watch it back and critique your performance, but don't be critical. So critique it, but don't be critical. So don't be like, I hate my voice.
It's constructive feedback.
Constructive feedback. Like, what could you do better? Did you talk too much? Did you talk too little? Were you animated enough? Were you over animated? Look at all that kind of stuff so you can make those improvements for next time.
Show it to a loved one and see what they say as
exactly well. That. But also someone, if you've got someone in your sphere of influence who will honestly tell you, like, my wife will tell me if something's not good, she will tell me, but not in an unkind way. I could say to her, what do you think about that? And she'll probably, like shit sandwich me. I really like this. This could be better, but this was brilliant. Like, she knows how to do that with me really well. So pass it on to someone who's, maybe there's so many podcasts out there now. If you happen to have someone in your sphere of influence who is a podcaster, forward it on to them and go, what do you think? Would you mind giving me some feedback on it? And that's what I'd say to do. And then like all the logistical stuff and how you get it out there and all that stuff and how we've successfully launched them so many times. You can go on YouTube and watch a bunch of videos. You can read a bunch of blogs. You can listen to podcasts about how to do podcasts. I've got a low ticket membership thing for a couple of £100. There's loads of them about. So it doesn't have to cost you. Udemy's probably got a podcast launch course, I'd imagine. Just
do a podcast about launching podcasts, though, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So they could
listen to that. That's a very good. Thank you. I forgot to upsell people onto that.
Thank you.
Podcast, yeah. How to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. So, yeah, we've taken the sort of about 60 of the most common questions or challenges that people have and just chucked into like 15, 20-minute episodes on how to actually go and do the thing. And then, like I say, just do it. Do it on your iPhone, do it on, through an old school dictaphone, whatever you need to do the first one. Most laptops have QuickTime recorders. You can record a video, you can record an audio. If you could do it remotely, record it via Zoom. Is that the best quality? No. Is it better than nothing? Yes. There's loads of tools out there, loads of blogs, loads of advice, but just see if you like doing it. And I like podcasting so much that I would do it even if I wasn't getting paid to do it. That's how much I love podcast. I mean, I shouldn't tell you that because
interesting.
What's that invoice? I haven't paid it yet. Maybe I won't. But find the thing that you love doing. Again, if you go into a podcast format and maybe there's a subject that you're going to talk about, but you actually don't really like it.
Yeah.
Are you going to want to do it? Are you going to want to be consistent? Are you going to stick it out? Or are you going to be one of those people, one of the 80% that never gets past episode 7? So be mindful of that. And then, if you're going to do it if you're a corporate company, if you're a B2B company, if you're doing it for value to your brand, you're looking to make content that actually adds bottom line value to your business, then maybe look at somebody who can come and professionalize it for you. Do you need 4K cameras and 3,000 quid bloody lamps and all that sort of nonsense? No, you don't. But if you're going to take it to the next level, then that's definitely what you can consider. But fundamentally, how should I phrase this? I'll just say it as it is. You can't polish your turd. It doesn't matter how good the cameras are. It doesn't matter how fancy the microphones are. It doesn't matter how, if you've got gold wires in the cables. If you've got a crap concept for a show that adds no value to an audience, it will not grow. So get started and, start now, get perfect later.
It's good advice. And like I ask every guest,
I knew this was coming up.
Have you practiced?
No, I haven't actually. I was thinking I should have done that.
18-year-old James.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would you give 18-year-old James?
Stop drinking.
What you know now?
Stop drinking.
Really?
Stop drinking early. Are you going to get gout in your 30s, mate? It's going to be real bad for you. No, my advice to 18-year-old me would be, I look back and I was a bit of a toe rag, but I kind of like who I was because I just have a go at anything. I had zero, I guess, that 18-year-old lack of fear or lack of self. You think you're invincible, you can do anything and everything. But what I would say to myself is just stick at a few things a bit more. Because when I started in radio, so when I had the radio job, for example, and I wanted to be on the radio, when I got sacked off that first gig, the guy who sacked me was the ex-head of Radio 1. So he was like, he had clout. And I was on a national digital radio station as well. So it wasn't like, a bedroom radio station. Yeah, it wasn't a hospital radio. But to that point, I should have gone and got a gig at hospital radio. Or I should have gone and got a gig at community radio. Because what I did, there's a whole thing that happened. I got sacked from this job. My dad had passed away very sadly. And I was working, the station was based in Newcastle. I lived in South London. I'm now grieving. I broke my ankle the day my dad died as well. It's super weird. I was just sort of sitting there going, I can't work for myself. I can't work on my own in this 2-bedroom flat anymore, cold calling people and going once every couple of weeks up to the radio station to do pre-recorded shows because that's what I was doing really. I thought, I just can't do this anymore. But I sat there and I would go on Radio Today and I'd go to Talent Now and all these like websites that would help you to land a job. And all I would do is I'd make little show reels and I'd send them off. I'll make a little show reel, I'll send it off. I got to the point where KMFM, which is a Kent radio station, they were looking for a breakfast show presenter. So I thought, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to show them why I am the perfect thing that they need at breakfast. So I made a breakfast basket, which had a show reel CD in it. This is how far back we go now. We had CDs. I had like a brunch kit in it. I had tea bags. I had a pot, and I bought all this stuff and I packaged it up and I took it to KMFM. I was like, I know that you're looking for the perfect addition to breakfast. Here it is. And the receptionist was like, wow, that's amazing. The CEO even messaged me, but I wasn't actually that good. I would be better off practicing my craft. And instead of sitting there all day, every day, crying into my soup, some days quite literally, about not having this job and getting sacked off the radio, I'd have been better off going and working in London at a community radio station and doing 3 or 4 gigs a week and sharpening my saw. So I guess the advice to 18-year-old James is the thing that you've got loads of enthusiasm for, have a bit more stickability and be willing to do the grunt work to get the result. Because I think sometimes it was I maybe gave up on stuff too quickly in retrospect.
That could translate over to a lot of people in a lot of situations, I think. I know certainly, just coming back to the kind of environment and people that I know and work with in my sphere, joinery, furniture making and whatever, there's a lot of people that will decide that they want to make cabinetry or whatever, and they just have a go. Rather than going and working for someone, doing an apprenticeship or even starting at the bottom of a ladder somewhere as a basic improver, labourer or whatever, they go, I like making cabinets, I'm going to buy some saws, rent a little workshop and have a go, and then doesn't work out and end up quitting 6-8 months, a year down the road. I think there's a lot to be said for if you actually decide that you really want to do that, go and get a job somewhere, go and do an apprenticeship, 100%. Go and start at the bottom and actually decide if it's the thing for you to do. And if it is, learn from everybody else, polish your craft,
I did it in radio. So I sort of just moved from thing to thing, try and get close to the goal. So the goal was get behind the microphone. I knew that from the sort of the get-go when I first went into that broadcast PR job. I was there for 18 months. I hated it. I hated every single day of it. I hated my Monday to Friday so much, I used to start getting worried about it on Sunday afternoon. So not only did I hate Monday to Friday, I started ruining my weekends as well. But that job I did because I knew I was keeping me close to the radio. And then I got headhunted to go and work for another agency doing the same sort of thing, broadcast PR. So I went there because I was like, that's a sideways move. And I went to that job because they were based on Golden Square. Golden Square was next door to Absolute Radio. And I was like, well, I need to get literally, figuratively, physically closer to the radio. So I'll go there and I'll be next to the radio. And then I got offered this job and I would just do sponsorship and promotion for 160 stations around the UK. I did do some community radio, but for a very short period of time, and probably went Billy Big Bollocks a bit too quick. And I was like, I can, got offered this job in a DAB digital radio station. I'm going to be the next Chris Moyles or Chris Evans. The world doesn't need another Chris Moyles or Chris Evans, it turns out. But get yourself closer. And I guess the other thing I would say to myself is have a bit more stickability. And to your point, get as close as you can, even if it's not the thing that you want to do. So, for example, I wanted to be on the radio. If I think back now, I probably should have but I was really good at sales. So I got sales jobs because I was great at selling. Well, go and get a job in sales at the radio station. Get a little bit closer so you're in the building. So then can you volunteer in the evenings? Can you volunteer at the weekend? Be willing to put your time in, but get as close to it as you can and prepare yourself when the opportunity comes, then you're actually ready. I wish I could get him around and scuff his neck. Come on, son, you can do it.
That's really good advice, though. And I can sort of imagine you, 18-year-old James, being
he's a rogue. He's a rogue.
I bet you look back with fond memories.
I do, to be fair. Yeah, I do. Because I still, people message me now. They're like, I remember you at school and you always talk about what you were going to do and what you're going to become. I remember my head of year 11. When did you do your GCSEs? Year 10, year 11. Yeah. And the day we got our results and we went in, I got the envelope and this guy came up to me, our head of year, I had an absolute ongoing battle with him the whole time because I was too bright to be put on like special classes to go out to do work. I wanted to go and do work experience because I hated school. I was so bored of it, but I couldn't do it because my grades were too good. I was like, this is ridiculous. Well, I could solve that problem. What should we ruin my grades? So he was like, I know what you're doing. I'll be smoking down the back of the field. I'll bunk off school. And he's called Mr. Way. He was a lovely fellow. And I look back and he shook my hand. He said, I think you're going to be pleased with your results. So he shook my hand. He said, do you know what? I can't work out with you. He said, you're either going to be a millionaire or you're going to jail. I wonder which one's going to happen first. Have a nice life.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
I was like, that's brilliant.
I've heard other teachers say that before, and I think actually that's normally what they'd say to people that become entrepreneurs.
Yeah, probably do
because it really is.
Yeah.
You're going one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's never the same way as everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and on that note, I think that's a really great way to end it. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that was really interesting, and I think for me, just to cap that off, I think if you're someone that's considering doing a podcast, like you've said, just give it a go. And if they want to contact you, James, how do people contact you if they want you to do all of this fancy?
Yeah, if you want the fancy stuff. So you can go to our website, thisisphonic.com, or I'm on LinkedIn and all the other social media.
Or they can listen to your podcast.
They can listen to our podcast, yeah. Or they can watch our other client podcasts to see how good we are. And thank you for trusting, because I know I never take it for granted. Like I will never forget that first day when I launched the podcast in 2017 and Gary Vee was number one, Tim Ferriss was number one, Gary Vee's number three, and I'm sat in between them like the meat of an influencer sandwich. I was like, this is the biggest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And although we've launched 189 shows and all the rest of it, I never take it for granted what someone is trusting us to go and do. So yeah, thanks man. Thanks for trusting us to make this brilliant content.
It's good work, long mate. Continue.
Nice one.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, mate.